evening, wherever you are, YouTubers. It's the first time for me to share on YouTube driving electric vehicle, in short EV, for long distance travel, in the hope that my story can help someone, especially those who are planning to get an EV or those who are planning to make a long distance travel using the EV. And by long distance here, I mean the distance that requires you to charge at least once before reaching your final destination. For me, I had to charge at least 7 times from the starting point to the point of destination. And so that is the experience that I want to share with you. And so stay tuned. First of all, it's the first time for me to be driving BMW iX1, and the total distance that I traveled up to this time when I'm recording this clip is around close to 6,000 kilometers, and out of that I drove 2,500 kilometers for a long distance travel, whereby I had to stop at least 7 times to charge. My last car was a Toyota model that I drove for about 10 years prior to changing to this current one. And when I decided to change, I was leaning towards an eco-friendly car for obvious reasons, of course. The range of the BMW iX1 is around 470 kilometers on a single charge, meaning that you can drive that distance before needing to charge again. But there are factors that affect that range, which are, for example, the speed or the mode that you're using. There are different modes in this vehicle. For example, there is dynamic, efficient, and sports mode. So depending on which one you use, then that can affect also the range of the car. Other factors are like use of air condition and radio. But for me, I did not control any of these except maybe the driving mode, which I always try to ensure that it is the efficient mode, which saves more energy than the other types of modes. And of course, in terms of speed limit in the auto route. But other than that, I continue to use the AC all the time, and also I use the radio. I will talk now about the trip itself and the preparations that I had to make prior to starting that travel. I read some reviews regarding the electric vehicles, and mostly were good, but there were also some concerns, and these concerns had to do with when it comes to long distance travel. Many of the reviews that I read were that it's not very convenient, especially if you have to stop the car and charge often. So the objective of the long distance travel that I made in September was to drive from a city in France close to the border with Switzerland, about 5 kilometers from the border with Geneva, to go to London to attend my daughter's graduation, and then travel to Bristol to take my son who was going to start his studies there. The total distance from Annemasse to London, it was around 1,100 kilometers, and there are more than 7 or 8 stops along the way. Now, in planning this travel, we decided, me and my daughter and son, because it was the 3 of us who were to travel, and I was the main driver, and my husband could not travel because of emergency. He had to stay behind. And so we had to divide this trip into 2. And so the initial leg of the journey was from Annemasse to Calais. A distance of over 800 kilometers. So in terms of preparation, I used traveling apps. The first one is the My BMW. and the second one is called the ARBP, or Auto Route Best Planner app. This ABRP app is the app that has been recommended by many, and that is one of the best apps to use when traveling long distance. And so I had to use ARBP as a backup, but my primary app that I use to travel is the My BMW. And why? Because I found that the My BMW app is simple to use, but also it has a lot of illustrations that you cannot otherwise find in the ARBP app. My BMW app can show a live video of the direction that you have to take along the way, together with the map. So you can have both, or sometimes it can show you a video and in the arrows showing exactly where you are supposed to exit and things like that. So for that, I found it to be very user friendly, and you can just see the direction on these videos through that big screen on the cockpit, which was very, very convenient for me. One thing I have to mention is that I'm not used to long distance travel. Actually, this is the first trip that I had to make myself as the main driver. Okay, so when you program the full journey to the destination in London, it's going to program the entire distance that you have to travel and the number of stops that you have to make, as you can see there. From home to Calais, where we take the shuttle train at Coquel, 8 hours long and 837 kilometers, and of course it's out of range. And in terms of the calculation of the route, this is what it shows. You see the flag is Calais, and the starting point is where the symbol of the car is showing. And as you can see, it shows about 7 stops to charge. So that is how we programmed our travel in segments. And because we found that it's easier to do that rather than mapping the entire route, because there is a factor that we could not control, which is the shuttle times, whether we would arrive on time. Another thing that we had to program was the entries in the My BMW app. So for example, the starting and end points, battery at departure, for which we made sure that we had at least 90% charged. The recommended charging level is around 80%, but because this was a long distance travel, we decided to charge to the highest possible, which was around, to be exact, around 97%. And we chose minimum charge at the charging station, the stops along the way, to be not below 30%, and that on arrival at Calais, we programmed the app that the charge will not be below 50%. And we did that for a reason, because it was the first time to travel this way, and so we had to make some precautions so that we are not stuck. And so, but in addition to that, we also did not rely on the My BMW app 100%. So we use a bit of common sense in that. For example, when preparing for charging along the way, we were manually looking at the amount of charge that the car still had, and whenever it reaches around 50%, we started searching for nearby charging station where we could charge the car. And why we did that was because we didn't want to take chance arriving at a charging station with a very low amount of charge and finding that that particular charging station is not functioning. And in fact, this is what we found in some cases, as I will explain. So when we program that way, then as you saw in the map, from Annemasse to Calais, there was a total of 7 stops and 8 hours of driving and 2 hours of charging. And we planned to leave just after midnight, the beginning of 7th of September. It was a Thursday, early hours of Thursday. And the planned arrival time, based on this app, we would have arrived at Coquel at around noon, and the plan was to take a 4 p.m. shuttle train to Folkestone from Coquel in Calais. And one thing I need to mention is that the distance between charging stations, roughly along the autoroute that we took, was around 80 kilometers. After every 80 kilometers up to 100 kilometers, you can find a charging station. And we were aiming to look for the high-powered charging stations, which were in short HPC, and we programmed the app to show us the stations which are compatible with the BMW, which were the Ionity and the Fastnet. We chose that purposely before starting the journey. Okay, so we start the travel at 20 minutes past midnight, and we started at the charging station at Aire de Bonneville, which is about 18 kilometers from Annemasse. So that was the starting point, because we wanted to charge to make sure that we had the maximum charging power possible. And at Bonneville, Aire de Bonneville, there is a high-powered charging station, the Ionity Charge, and so we left there at around 20 minutes past midnight. And then at 2:30 a.m. we stopped along A40 or Autoroute 40 at Aire de Bourg-Josseron for recharging. Around 4:51, that is about 2 hours later, and 130 kilometers later, we tried to charge at one of the EV stations along A6, Autoroute du Soleil, at an area called Marseille, but there we found that the station was in total darkness at that time. It was around 4:51, close to 5 a.m. And so we had to find another charging station. And I believe maybe because it was an odd hour of the night. And so maybe it was a bad timing on our side, but that's what we found. So, but as a result, we had to find the nearby charging station, which happened to be just on the opposite side of the autoroute, around the same area. But because it is on the autoroute, then we had to go ahead or drive ahead about 5-6 kilometers before, exiting and making a U-turn to return to this charging station, which is just opposite to where we were. So there was about 10-12 kilometers that we lost along the way, and of course time to try to come to this charging station. But there we found that the charging station had, all the machines were working, and we were able again to charge to above 80% and be able to continue to travel ahead. Then we drove from that time until 7:24 a.m. in the morning on the 7th, and we stopped along A31 at 21490 Brognon. So the charge at that particular station was broken. So because we just decided to charge based on our rule that, when it's 50% we charge, we were not worried because we knew that we had a sufficient charge to travel another 100 kilometers on that. And so we just had our breakfast there and proceeded to the next charging station, whereby an hour later, at around 8:37 a.m., we stopped along the same autoroute 31, A31, at an area called Perronnier-les-Fontaines, code 52160, and where we were able to charge to the maximum level that we had put for ourselves. Close to 2 hours later, we stopped at Shell along A26 at Aire de Somsou to recharge, and there we found a couple of cars charging, and there was a station which was vacant, and when we tried to use that, it was not working for us. Charger for our car was not compatible with that machine, and so we were stuck. And the thing is, we became relaxed, and for that reason we didn't follow the rule that we made for ourselves of ensuring that when it is 50% we try to find another charging station. And so we started finding a charging station when we were around 30%, and when we went to that station we had already a very small amount of charge, and unfortunately in that station we couldn't charge. And when we tried to search for the next autoroute electric vehicle charging station, it was the car was beyond the range that our car could travel, and so we were stuck. And for that reason we decided to go inward, to exit the autoroute and go inward about 26 kilometers to find the next charging station, which was a very scary journey for us, because we didn't know where we were going, whether the charge would be compatible or it would be available for us. So we had to travel towards Vitry-le-François to find this charging station. About 30 minutes drive, but when you do not have sufficient charge, it's a bit tedious and it's a bit cumbersome. And I think that was the biggest challenge that we had on our way. But fortunately we were able to charge the car. At around 1, we charged the car again at Autoroute Anglais in the area called Villeneuve-sur-Aisne at 15:27 at Autoroute Anglais in a city called Saint-Hilaire-Court, and at 4:30 or 16:27 we charged again at Boulevard du Kent, which is already in Coquelles. We missed the train that we intended to travel with because of these changes, but we took an 18-hour evening Euro shuttle crossing at Coquelles in Calais on the side of France, and we traveled about 35 minutes in the shuttle tunnel. And so we charged along M25 only once at around half past 8 in a place along M25 at Cobham, and by 23:38 we had arrived London residence. And so that is the part from Annemasse to London. Because my daughter's graduation was the next day, on Friday, we decided to ride the Uber to the graduation. And fortunately, this driver, the Uber driver, told us that you can register your car, your electric car, with the London Transport, and you can have what they call this ultra low emission zone charge, ULEZ, and low emission charge zone charge, LEZ, be scrapped off your, from all the electric cars. And that's what we did, because we also had an intention of driving around in London, in the center of London, so that we can use the time we had. We had about 2 days, only 2 days in London, so that we can see as much as we can the touristic attractions in the city through driving. And it would have been more convenient, and given that we didn't have to pay for these taxes due to emission of greenhouse gases. And so that's what we did, and we registered. The following day we were able to get the permission, and so we were able to drive, and it was all good, and it was a very nice experience. And in terms of charging, from what I saw, and again, that is my limited view, being it's the first time to drive in London, I found that the charging were either DC or AC, which sometimes they are slow charging, and they were on the side of the road. And it's not a place where you could have, parked your car on a station, dedicated station for charging your vehicle. And again, that is my limited view. It's possible that, there were such types of charging stations within the city of London. And so the next day we traveled to Bristol. We charged once at a station along the way. From London, I think it was, let me see, so we charged only once, and I think it went well. As for the return journey from Bristol to Folkestone to get the shuttle train, it was very straightforward. We had our own lessons we learned from this experience, and we made sure not to repeat those. First of all, to charge the car to the highest possible level, and then to make sure that whenever we reach around 50% or so, we start finding a charging station. So going back, it was very straightforward, and we really enjoyed the travel completely. When it comes to conclusions, based on this whole experience of driving for about 2,500 kilometers, the total journey from Anmas to London to Bristol, back to Anmas, these are the lessons that I've learned. That, first of all, regarding long distance travel by electric vehicle, it's possible. About the convenience, to me, if you ask my opinion, it's yes, and maybe no if you don't plan you don't plan well your travel. If you didn't plan well, yes, it can inconvenience you, as we saw when we were driving to London, where at one point we reached at a station where it's in total darkness. But the good thing, at that point we had sufficient charge to go to the next station, and where we relaxed a little bit and relied more on the app, and we went to a station and it was not possible to charge, and the next charging station on the autoroute, it was beyond the range of our car, and so we had to go inward over 20 kilometers trying to find a charge. So that is an inconvenience, but if you plan your travel well, like we did when we were coming back, because we had already learned our lessons, it was very straightforward and quite rewarding. So the second lesson is that don't rely 100% on the app. Okay, and if possible, have more than one app. We found use in both apps, both the My BMW as well as the ARBP app. Both were useful, though we mainly relied on My BMW app together with our own common sense. The third lesson is, if you're traveling, you're not used to travel long distance, have a companion, because that's very helpful, especially in helping in advising what to do, where to go. For example, for our case, we missed the train that we intended to take at Calais, but someone was working on the, rebooking another train as we continued to driving. And so that was really convenient for us. And also the other lesson that I think we should take is to take, riding long distances an adventure. For us, I think it was a good adventure. We had a time to, see the landscape, with beautiful landscape of France and small towns in France and in UK, on the side of UK as well. It was quite exhilarating. It was quite beautiful. So for us, it was quite a nice experience. I am very happy with the car. It's a very modern car. It's a very comfortable car, as many of you would, with experience of driving this type of car, would say. And the bottom line is that I'm reducing the carbon footprint, which is a good thing. So in general, for this whole entire journey, I'm so happy that I did it using the BMW IX1, and I'm so happy with the car. So I'll stop here. If you have any comments, put them in the chat, and thank you for listening.